Welcome to the Sports Business Classroom Audio Experience. I'm Alex Cocoros, and in this series, we're diving into the journeys of professionals who are making an impact in the sports industry. From executives to innovators, each guest will share their story, the lessons they've learned, and the strategies that help them succeed. This isn't just about the business of basketball. It's about life, sports, and the mindset it takes to thrive in a competitive world. Each conversation will provide insights and actionable advice you can use to take your own career to the next level. Whether you're looking to break into the industry or sharpen your skills, this series is here to help you achieve your goals. Let's jump in and learn from the best. In this episode of the SBC Audio Experience, we sit down with Joe Vardon. He's a seasoned NBA journalist with a career spanning over 2 decades, currently serving as a senior NBA writer for The Athletic. A native of Ohio, Vardon attended the College of Worcester before launching his journalism career covering Cleveland sports in the early 2000s. His early work included reporting on the Browns, Guardians, which are formerly the Indians, and Cavaliers, providing him with a front-row seat to LeBron James' rise in his hometown of Akron and the impact of a superstar in a small market like Cleveland. His journey as a Cavs beat writer led him to cover LeBron's championship run, solidifying his reputation as one of the most insightful voices in basketball journalism. After years of covering the NBA across various outlets, Vardon made the transition to The Athletic, where he continues to break down the league's biggest narratives, from player movement to international expansion. Let's get into it. Thank you so much for tuning into the Sports Business Classroom Audio Experience. Joining us today is a senior NBA writer for The Athletic, Joe Vardon. How are you doing today, Joe?
Well, another busy day, but not too bad. Not too bad.
Nice. I appreciate you for taking the time. I know you've had a busy schedule these past couple of weeks. You were in Paris for the NBA games last week. Talk to me about that experience and being there in Paris.
Well, the full trip actually was to Paris for about 6 days, and then I went on to Geneva and then to Berlin for some various international reporting assignments. So ended up being about a 10-day trip. The highlight, of course, or the anchor of the trip being, as you mentioned, to Paris for the NBA Global Games. This time there were 2 that they've never done that before during the regular season. And it was a big deal. I mean, much bigger than normal because it was the San Antonio Spurs and Victor Wembanyama, who's from suburban Paris, and this was his first trip playing where he grew up as an NBA superstar with the Spurs. He was there last summer, of course, with Team France, but this was all wholly different, and it worked out great for the league. I think it was something like either the most watched NBA global game ever. So, it certainly kept me busy and engaged and interested. And, in a way, I guess it's surprising that they probably won't do this next year with the Spurs in Paris, just because such an obvious draw.
Right. Yeah, you mentioned Wemby. I mean, it's nothing like we've ever seen before. What was it like seeing those fans at a firsthand experience? Because you talk about how global the game is now, that they really go crazy for the NBA.
Yeah, they do. And, I was just in Paris in August for the Olympics and covering men's basketball, of course. The crowd for the gold medal game, it's in Paris. It's Team France against Team USA. And so there was this amazing moment, of course, with the national anthems and the national pride you felt on the side of France. And, of course, with Wemby being there. But he was just one of 12. I mean, he was part of Team France. So the whole event really wasn't about him. These 2 games were about him. And all 15,000 people in the arena were all there for him, basically, to really, rally around him and sort of celebrate France and Paris through him. So just an incredible atmosphere. And I would say it's kind of a testament to not only everything we're just saying, but also Victor's rising star power. Is he actually complained a little bit after the first game, What he complained about was he wanted the national anthem instead of somebody they pay to sing. He wanted the crowd to sing it. And so they kept the two singers for the Star Spangled Banner and for the French song. But the woman who's professional, I believe she's an opera singer of some kind, certainly trained and a pro. She, in French, tells the crowd that basically she's going to be sharing the microphone with them. So she started the first bar or two of the song and then just held out the microphone.
Wow.
And the crowd belted it out, and it was because Wemby had asked for it. So that was pretty cool.
He's already got that power. Just got selected to his first All-Star game too, so he's already living up to the hype. So what are you doing in Berlin now? Because you said you were in Berlin, right?
Yeah, I was in Berlin. So I mean, I don't mind saying, talking about it. There's a story I've been looking at for a while that really gets into the how European basketball and their players have caught up to the Americans in terms of professionals being produced and NBA players being produced. I think everybody, even casual NBA fans, recognize that there's this surging influx of players not born in the U.S. in general, and most of them come from Europe. We all recognize that, Wemby just being one of many examples. But what maybe we don't understand is just how many we're talking about here. It's 30% of the league now. That is a huge number, and it's probably only going to go up. And so I've been wanting to get into the how did this happen? How did these players become so good, and why do they seem to be so prepared for the NBA? So that story took me to Berlin, and I don't want to get into it beyond that, but I certainly found some answers while I was over there, and I can't wait to sit down and write it.
That's awesome, and the game obviously continues to grow globally year in and year out. I wanted to ask you, like, when you're trying to write a story about this, it could take years and stuff, because this is a podcast related to people trying to get into the industry, whether they want to be journalists or on camera. How do you go about creating a story, and how long does that usually take?
Well, I mean that's a great question, and I think it depends on, for starters, what the assignment is. So for something like this is what we call enterprise reporting. And these stories take, the short answer is they take as long as they take. You don't typically have a deadline for this. You just maybe have some target dates to try to get something turned in, and then the editing process can take, it could take a week, it could take a month. I've had stories being edited for 2 months, with working with editors to get it just right. So you only have time in any season to do 1 or 2 of these. Maybe 3, like depending on the subject matter and where you have to go for this. So realistically, I started reporting this story 3 weeks ago, and it'll probably take me a week, I would say, maybe a little bit longer, to go through all of the material that I've gathered. And then, it'll take a few days to write it. And then you send it on to the editors and see what they think of it, and then how much more work needs to be done to change it, or what's the design process. So realistically, I don't see this story being done before All-Star, almost assuredly not. And I guess it would probably run in March.
Wow. And now you're at The Athletic, is there like an added pressure trying to get the story out quicker because it's a bigger company and you kind of have to write for them?
No, I would say, if anything, there's less pressure to hurry on stories like this. It's a massive company, for one. We have, the number is certainly north of 30, and it could be north of 40 in terms of bodies covering the NBA. So we have no shortage of coverage and different stories and angles. And then for a story like this, that would be, it's more, it's not just a basketball story. I mean, this is a global trend story. So, we're going to have those in baseball and college basketball and the NFL and on and on. So no pressure there. You got to take your time, get it right. And then, like I've kind of mentioned, I mean, for stories like this, there can be an arduous editing process where more reporting is even required, like after an editor sees it for the first time.
So you've been at The Athletic for a while, like 6 or 7 years. You started out as a beat writer for Cleveland sports, the Browns, Indians, Cavs. How was that experience from, being a local beat reporter to now you're covering at the Athletic? You just want to talk about your beginning experience in Cleveland?
Well, I mean, my beginning experience, like you said, that was, that was like 24 years ago, 23 years ago. And I was working for a chain of small newspapers in Northeast Ohio. And I basically recreated our own one-man Cleveland bureau for all of those papers. I'm honest about this now. I was basically trying to copy Tom Withers at the Associated Press and just do what he did for the whole country in Cleveland, just for the papers that were part of this chain. And so that's how I got started. I was 20. I mean, I guess I started this in 2002 in the spring. And so I would have been not yet 22 years old. And I was travel-wise, I went to New York for LeBron's first game at Madison Square Garden. And then I think I went to spring training. And then I think for the Browns, like if they would play Pittsburgh or Cincinnati, I would drive. If they played Detroit, I would drive. But yeah, working for nothing. I think my first salary was $17,000. But I saw it all and saw how the pros do it and the kinds of questions that they ask and how hard they worked. And I certainly worked very hard to get my foot in the door that way. But my career, I mean, that was so long ago and the industry has changed and I've done so much and seen so much. I covered politics for 6 years, covered 2 presidential elections. And then the last 11 years I've been in the NBA. And, 4 of those were covering the Cavs for the Plain Dealer. All 4 years they went to the finals and, of course, won the title in 2016. 2 of those years I was I was specifically the LeBron beat reporter. It was a crazy story. I wanted to leave politics. Is it okay? Can we talk about this?
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead.
I wanted to leave politics in the spring of 2014. Like it just burned out by it, and wanted to get back into sports, and it kind of wanted to move back to Cleveland. We were living in Columbus at the time. I was working at the Columbus Dispatch, and it just so happened that I knew the 2 Cavs writers at the Plain Dealer. One was retiring and the other one wanted off the beat and had removed herself from the beat. And so the NBA season in Cleveland was over, the playoffs were going on, and I expressed my interest, and the editors there knew me from my political work, and so they were happy to have the conversation. And so we had an interview set for July 15th. Well, as many of your listeners probably remember, on July 11th of 2014 is when LeBron announced that he's coming back. On July 12th, the national media realized that there was no Cavs writer at the Cleveland newspaper, and that became a national story. And so when I went up to Cleveland for my interview, I showed up and they said, well, we've got a new idea. We want to have 2 jobs. One to cover the team and one to cover LeBron. And my background in both sports and politics made me a unique fit for that role. And so I ended up becoming one of the only people in American sports journalism history to be hired to cover a singular athlete in a team sport. And so, that's a long way away from being 21 years old and sitting in the dugout at an Indians game during batting practice. But it's been an incredible ride. I've been covering USA basketball for the last 5 years now, and I've been around the world. I don't. This isn't like a brag. I've kind of lost count how many laps I've made around, just going everywhere with them, and then I also get to do that a lot in my day job with the NBA, and I was in the bubble, one of the 12 to do that. So it really I really have gotten a chance to see the world and experience it, and get to do things that just not even that many people in our industry get to do.
So you were part of like 2 Cleveland LeBron eras, obviously in the early 2000s. Were you guys familiar with each other once you got assigned that second time around?
That's a good question, and I would say no. LeBron's got an excellent memory, and he probably doesn't forget a face, and so he also at the time, when he was a teenager and I was in my early 20s, he tried to say hello to the younger people, but his life had taken off so rapidly after I left that job. And if you think about everything that he went through in Miami, so I don't know, but what he did know why I was there the second time. And he knew that I was assigned to him. And so we very quickly developed a relationship based on that.
It is crazy to think about because obviously Cleveland's a smaller market, but then LeBron comes back, it just all of a sudden blows up like that. Like, what was it like to be a part of that experience?
Yeah, it became the center of the basketball universe, and really there were 2 sides to that. There was the east side, which was Cleveland, and then on the west side it was Golden State, and those 2 teams, everything was news, and there was a constant daily pressure to make sure you were around and had the story of the day related to this global icon and superstar. And so, there like people, Brian, my good friend Brian Windhurst, used to say of the 3 of us who lived that life in those days, that we lived 8 years in the 4 that we did it together. And I guess it was like that because of the work and the travel and going through 4 finals. But, now I'm talking about, David McMenamin of ESPN and Jason Lloyd, who was my colleague at The Athletic at the time. He was at the Akron Beacon Journal. Instead of, being adversarial or even enemies because we were competing, we decided to kind of stick together as colleagues, and we competed every day. We worked hard to get the story for ourselves every day, but otherwise we felt like the 3 of us, like, sort of working the beat that way would be more effective, and certainly help to deal with the pressure, and hold this popular team, accountable for its actions. And then we also lived, we're all the same age, traveling the country on company's dime and covering the most popular player and this team that was such a lightning rod. It was a whirlwind, and we had the best time. And you look back on those 4 years, it's 4 of the best years that we ever had.
Sorry to interrupt. Bobby Marks, Sports Business Classroom Lead Instructor here. Are you enjoying this episode of the Sports Business Classroom Audio Experience? Take your knowledge to the next level today with our new in-depth education course, MBA CBA Mastery Version 2. Whether you're inspiring to work in the MBA or just want to level up your skills off the course, this course is for you. Sign up and start learning today at cbamastery.com. That's right, CBAmastery.com.
Yeah, I was gonna ask if there was that competitive aspect, but I guess all you guys, covering LeBron, I guess it helped bolster your stories at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, there was certainly, again, I mean, there were days where I'd get it, and then there were days that Dave would get one, and Jason would get one. Um, this was kind of cool too. That, I mean, LeBron treated us, he knew that it was better for him to have a relationship with the local media at that time.
Right.
And so he made sure to cultivate one. And there was so many nights where he would talk to the three of us after the cameras were off and after everybody's recorders were either put away or the people holding them were gone, and he would tell us more stuff. And so, the three of us would have the same information the next morning, or otherwise just be able to kind of talk, and just understand each other. Michael Jordan used to do that with Michael Wilbon and David Aldridge and Sam Smith and the people who were around the Bulls in those days. Steph does that certainly, and did in Golden State, but that's not usual anymore. So it was one of the last times where you had a relationship like that.
Right. What would your advice be in building relationships with these players? Because really during the season, you're with them 24/7. At times you got to give them space. How do you build up that relationship over time?
Yeah, I mean, I say this a lot, how badly I feel for the younger people who do now what I used to do, because I just don't think that the general conditions of NBA locker rooms are the same that they were before the pandemic, and maybe things were even eroding before that. So the way to do it is to work really hard and ask fair but difficult, or certainly appropriate questions, which means holding them to account after losses, or if with poor play or poor behavior or whatever the case. When those things happen, you gotta bring it up, because I feel like they respect that. That's certainly that's how I forged the working relationship with LeBron that I had with him, was by doing it that way. So that's the first thing. But then the second thing is, you need to be able to talk to them with your phone put away, your phone in your back pocket, nothing's recording, and you're just talking. Because you need to be able, you spend so much time around each other, that you need to be able to have those kinds of casual conversations, because when you do that and you build a rapport, when it comes time, for the harder business, they'll respect you more for it. And you have that relationship there, that they understand where you're coming from. And my fear is that that those kinds of relationships just aren't allowed to occur now. There's so many different teams. I'm not going to call any one of them out by name here now, but they're just teams throughout the league that actively, their employees work to try to prevent you from having conversations like that when there aren't TV cameras and when there isn't a formal interview going on. And that's too bad. I actually think that hurts the players a lot more than it helps them. Certainly with, the media who are working for companies that will pay to have reporters around at home and on the road. And I do hope that changes. I hope that before LeBron retires, before Steph retires, that they really explain to their colleagues. Durant is another one. He's always been great. Really explain to their colleagues why this helps them, if they have better relationships with the reporters covering them.
It's a good point, Ray, because all these guys are good guys at the end of the day. They got to their position for a reason. They're not dumb, so they understand that you guys are, have a job, and it is a shame that I guess you're saying it has changed a little bit, but I guess that's kind of segueing to my next question. obviously the game has changed. The world has changed. You started out in the early 2000s where it was more newspaper, on paper stuff, and now we're in the world of digital media. How was that transition, and was that a little difficult for you at first?
Oh yeah. I'll say, I made a couple mistakes when I went from political coverage, uh, where and even now, like political reporters do this too, and I think it's eroded. Um, it has helped erode the trust that the general public has in political media. But the mistake uh, is going on Twitter or social media and um, treating it like you're at a bar, and you're cracking jokes, and sort of making light of the subject matter or the people that you're actually covering. Um, I did that, and lots of people do that, but I did it when I first got into the NBA, and I think that really, hurt me, like hurt me with some, with some relationships with some of the players in the league, or maybe some front office types, because you think you're being funny and you think you're talking to your followers, your fans of the team, and you are, but they see that too. They meaning the teams. And there's just a difference between legitimately, calling out like the things we were talking about earlier, in your work, versus making light of it, cracking jokes at their expense. And so that was the first mistake. And then the second mistake was thinking that the way that you get information in political journalism, where these are all politicians, they're paid with tax dollars, so they're kind of beholden to answer your questions, and thinking it was the same in the NBA when it isn't. That you have to take your time and you have to build the relationships to eventually get them to open up to you. I didn't think it would be that way, and so kind of came in to the league, bull in a china shop, and for the people who didn't understand my background, like they were really rubbed the wrong way by that. So, yours was a question about the social media and the digital age. We could talk about actually having to work faster in some respects because things go straight to online. Then you could also talk about being at the Athletic for a while where there were no deadlines at all. Like you're writing, you get done when you get done. That's not so much how I do most of this job now. Like all the big events that I cover, all those stories have to go up right away. So I guess you could say that newspaper training to write on deadline for newspapers has really helped me in the digital age. But I just always think about and go back to, being careful on this social medium or these social mediums. You think the audience is wide, you think you're talking to one group of people, and you think they're all getting the joke, and you do that, and the joke can be on you.
Everybody's had Twitter fingers one way or the other. Yeah, I mean, you talk about politics. I have to bring it up. I mean, politics and sports, they're two different beasts in their own right. What's the difference between the two, and how do you go about writing for politics and sports? I know it's a broad question, but
Yeah. So my last year in that was 2014. So that's 2 years into Obama's second term. Trump was just beginning to be kicking around, like running. Certainly there hadn't been a primary yet with Jeb Bush or anything like that. And so it was a different climate. And so I actually used to compare them favorably. I would say that politics and in sports, you have a winner, you have a loser, and you have a scoreboard. And it's your job to explain to the audience the hows and the whys behind that score, to highlight the winners, to expose the losers. and to always just be able to paint the picture with a broader brush. Now you're talking about a situation where you know, in politics, you can there's so much writing out there. There's so much opinion out there that you can find the truth that you're looking for. So if you're a typical like paid capital J journalist who's just there to report the news, and your entire job is to just get the story, the moment that it gets published, automatically 47% of the audience fundamentally disagrees with everything you wrote. That would be hard, and I don't think I could handle that. Where now in sports, luckily, it's not like that. Like the audience comes to us for the information, or to see our analysis of their team or of something that's going on. They don't come like looking to disagree with you.
Right.
That's just not. I mean, of course, there's a component of that, but it's not the same. So I would say there's a fairly large difference now.
Do you feel like there was a similarity in terms of your audiences? Because, in politics, like people are psychotic about their own party, and then in sports, that people are psychos about a certain team. You know what I mean? You see what I'm trying to get at, or?
Oh yeah, for sure. And there's always going to be the component in sports journalism that if if like you hate my team, you hate this team, like that is always there. But I find at the Athletic / New York Times, like that the audience, they have to pay for this. It's not free. And so the audience, generally speaking, is a more thoughtful, curious audience that is interested in the nuance that's in the story. There can be negative comments on stories for sure, and sometimes they're right, and sometimes they're mean and totally off base. But I think by and large the experience is such that it's not, you are not accused automatically of bias or of an agenda.
Right. And your track record is pretty, spread out across the board, covering football, baseball, basketball, politics. Was that your kind of, mentality from being a young kid to not pigeonhole yourself to one certain thing and kind of try to develop yourself through a bunch of different topics?
I mean, since you asked, I will say one thing I give myself credit for is at a very young age, I knew that I wasn't very good. That I had some raw skills, but wasn't, had a very long way to go. And I knew that if I wanted to get good, that I would have to learn how to do the news. And that I felt that if I could go and learn how to do that, it would ultimately make me a much better sports reporter. And so that turned out to be right for sure. And then I was fortunate enough to be able to do it, to get into news and then break through and eventually wind my way into a really legitimate political scene as a politics reporter in the capital city of at the time the most important swing state in presidential years. And I was covering a governor that was a very active governor with my day job, who's very busy and tried a bunch of things and made for a lot of really, challenging days. But it wasn't just the politics stuff. I did local government. I did crime. The story that was my big break, if you can believe this, I was working in a bureau in Toledo. So it was the Toledo Blade, but I wasn't downtown yet. I was hired to work out basically in a warehouse, in a distribution center in the southern part of the county, and even in the county the next county over from where Toledo, Ohio is. And I was told, like, if there's an opening in sports, we'll move you over there, but this is a way to get yourself in the door. Will you do this? I said yes. And so every day I would sit there by myself in this empty warehouse in a little office, and I would check the fax machines for any press releases from the township police, and I'd go to school board meetings. And so one day a traffic report came in on the fax machine. And, you hear that fax noise that I don't even know if you know what that sounds like, but it screams at you. And it was a traffic report. There was a rollover accident on the main highway going north and south, between Cincinnati and Detroit, Michigan, I-75. But this is all the way up near us in Toledo. And it was a single car rollover accident. And it said the reason the car rolled over was because the people driving the car were trying to catch a bra that had been thrown out of another vehicle. And so the car had swerved so the passenger could try to catch it in the air. And this became a sensational story, where, we were trying to find the bra, and like on the Devil's Strip, in between the two sides of the highway, and like the interviews, between like it turned out to be like a Girls Gone Wild case. Like it was a car full of girls who were in high school, and these two, like, kind of, well, I mean, I guess I can't really remember, but they were older guys. They were older than the girls for sure. And they were like egging them on, and just, but like, so working through something serious, like a police report in a car crash, but then finding out the details that went into this crash. Like I said, that was my big break. And I have countless stories about things like that, about just working in the news, that taught me how to get the information that the reader is going to want, package it correctly and quickly, and get it out in a timely manner.
Was sports always, number one on your list of what you wanted to cover?
Yeah, I mean, when I was young, and when I first got into the business, for sure. But I was weaving back and forth. Like, after the bra story, I was moved downtown in Toledo and started doing local government. And then the Michigan job opened, covering Michigan football and Tigers baseball. And so I went to it. But then I got pulled back into the 2008 presidential election. And then in 2010, I was back on the Ohio governor's race. And so, there was sort of like back and forth, and I really enjoyed it. And then when the Columbus Dispatch hired me to be one of their two political reporters and to cover the governor's office, that was it. Like, that was what I was going to do, and was excited and wanted to go all the way to the top in political journalism and move to Washington, and and have the rest be history. But things, interests change, and things change, and where you want to live changes sometimes. And so now, I mean, this is covering the NBA is the longest, like, this is by far the single longest tenure of anything I've ever had. And working at The Athletic, I think this is my 7th year. Maybe it's my 6th. No, I guess it's got to be my 7th. By far the longest tenure I've ever had at a company. So, I mean, am I going to do this forever? I can't say. I mean, if you're fortunate enough to have this kind of career in a sport like I've had, you build this huge Rolodex of sources, and you just sort of have institutional knowledge for how things work. And, so it's hard to give that up, but I remain curious, and, I wouldn't go back to political coverage, but, it's a big world out there, and there's lots of stuff going on.
Being around in so many places and spots and traveling, you have, I'm sure, met a lot of people along the way. And how important is it developing those connections that, you can foster down the line?
Yeah, I mean, it is important. I mean, especially like I just said, it's a big world, and you think about what's happening right now in the NBA, where Adam Silver wants is legitimately trying to start a league in Europe. And Europe is a long way away from Cleveland, Ohio, which is where I still live. Um, but because of all these travels, I I know people there. I know people who will be affected by this and who work for teams that are already like in Europe, or and know people who might be involved in the new league. And that just doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't happen if you're simply covering the NBA. Like, say simply, like, there's not that many of those jobs anyway. But if you're just covering the NBA, or if you're covering the Rockets or whatever, um, those opportunities don't necessarily exist. So, you know, it's been a dizzying experience to travel this much and get to meet the people that I have met, and really develop some relationships that stand the test of oceans. I count that as a very fortunate part of having done what I've gotten to do.
You also just like the travel aspect of it, like just being in Paris for a week and being all over?
Absolutely. I mean, I've been.
Training, but
It is, but I mean, I've been to Paris 3 times in the last 12 months.
yeah, well, that's
And I mean, I mean, everything I'm saying is true. Like, I've seen the Eiffel Tower, like, it lights up at night. People know that, but I've seen it go out for the last time that night, like at 2. You know, I've walked the Great Wall in China and been on the Christ the Redeemer mountain in Rio, and walked the Persian Gulf. I'd staying at the same in the same room in the same hotel in Abu Dhabi two different summers. That alone is is hard to do. I mean, been to Tokyo, the largest city in the world, and Mexico City, the 5th largest city in the world, and I've been to London, and been to bullfights in Malaga, and been flown through Turkey however many times, and now 2 more countries with Germany and Switzerland. I've actually been to Switzerland a couple different times, once for politics. And I don't feel like just the way things were. Like, I mean, I'm a kid from Akron, Ohio, who went to a small school in a farm town in Ohio for college, and I mean, vacation to me was maybe Disney World or Myrtle Beach. And so, like, through this job is how I've gotten to see the world. And I don't take that for granted. I mean, it's 11 years now. It's 5 full years traveling the world, and it could all be over tomorrow. So every time you go out there, every time you get another chance to do something like this, you make the most of it.
How gruesome was the bullfighting in Malaga? I was in Madrid last spring. Sonny and Bro and I went to a bullfight. I'm never going back.
It's it is terrifying, and there are things that you didn't know. So, I read. I know you can see my bookshelf. I don't know which books you can see, but there's a bunch of Hemingway books up there, like most of them.
Yeah.
And he's written 2 about bullfighting, and I had read them both before going. So there was a lot that I knew. Like, I knew how the fights worked, and what the stages were, and typically what the end is. But it's still it is yeah, you're not ready for some of what you hear and some of what you see. But you also feel like immense tradition
Right,
from
for
it.
culture, that's their way of life, and
It is, and it's ancient, and you can see, like, the ring in Malaga. It's like standing outside of Wrigley Field.
Right.
It is, or like Fenway, and I mean, Hemingway had been there and had written about that one, and so you feel all that too. But yeah, I don't think I'll ever be going back.
Yeah, I know. I think it was a one-time thing. It's good enough for me. But we could talk bullfighting all day. But just to I guess one big final question is just some overall advice for anyone who's not just trying to be a journalist, but just aspiring to be into sports, and how you go about that.
Yeah. I mean,
I guess you get this all the time, but
well, no, yeah. I mean, because if you want to be a journalist, you have to not be afraid to ask the questions, and you have to understand, like, you have to realize that it's okay that the reason you thought you were drawn to it was because you love sports and you want to be around sports. That's okay. But once you get there, then you have to remember that it's a job, and your job is not to love sports. Like, your job is to do the job. So that would be one piece of advice that I would give. But otherwise, it is to be curious, and it's to ask questions, and it's to read, not just consume the news and the writing and all the things that are going on in your favorite sport or in the sport in which you work, but really, really read and read literature and read news stories and find how people deliver, information and express their thoughts. And, that's one way to find your own voice. And then, you got to, if you're going to write for a living, you got to write and write and write and write. It's not something that comes right away. And, if you're going to talk for a living, you learn how to say things that get people's attention, and be able to back it up right away. So, I mean, that's it. And then I guess the last thing, I've kind of already said this, was just be wherever you get in this job or in the sports industry, you just don't take it for granted. Use it to enhance your life. If you're going to travel, or if you're going to meet these athletes, or if you're in a position where you can help people who can't afford it get tickets or get shoes from Nike or whatever, like, if you're in this position, use it for good. I think those are all the things that I would say.
Well, Joe, thank you so much, man, for taking the time. And me personally, I learned a lot from just talking to you, and I know you've been busy, so I really appreciate it, man.
No, I really enjoyed this, and it was cool that you thought to have me on. Thank you.
Yeah, no, great. I'd love to keep in touch,
Yeah.
the rest of the season, and I'll be tuning into some of your stories. So,
All right, my man. Yeah, keep in touch, please. Anything I can do.
great. Have a good one, man. Thank you.
All right, Alex. You too, buddy.
Thank you so much for tuning into our SBC Professional Series featuring Joe Vardon. We hope you enjoyed learning about his journey and gained valuable insights on breaking into the sports industry. Like, subscribe, and please leave a review on social media. Also tag us on your IG story at Sports Business Classroom. This episode is also brought to you by Hall Pass Media, a full-service marketing agency that specializes in brand consulting, event management, digital marketing, and creative design. For more information on Hall Pass Media, go to hallpassnetwork.com. Thank you, and see you next time.